Picture this. You're sitting at your kitchen table on a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, and for the first time in maybe years, you open your banking app and actually feel something close to proud, because the number staring back at you has a comma in it, more than one actually, $300,000. You saved $300,000. And for just a second, just a brief, quiet second, you let yourself feel good about that. Then your brain does what it always does. It starts asking questions. Is that enough? Can I actually retire on this? What does my life look like when the paychecks stop? And that quiet pride, it starts to fade because nobody gave you a straight answer about what $300,000 actually means in retirement. That's what today is about. Hi, I'm Tom, and today we're going to talk about what $300,000 really looks like as a retirement number. Not the optimistic version, not the scary version, the honest one. Here's the thing that nobody talks about when it comes to retirement savings. We've been trained to think in milestones. $1 million used to be the magic number. Then it became $2 million. Now some financial headlines will tell you that you need $3 or $4 million just to feel secure. And if you're sitting on $300,000 right now, reading those articles feels like someone casually mentioning you're running a marathon and you haven't even found your running shoes yet. But here's where I think most of the conversation gets it completely wrong. It treats retirement like a single universal experience, like there's one number that works for every single human being, regardless of where you live, how you spend your time, what gives your life meaning, or what other income sources you have. That's not retirement planning. That's a headline. The reality is far more nuanced and honestly more hopeful than most people realize, but also more honest than some financial content gives you credit for. $300,000 is not a finish line, but it's also not nothing. In fact, for a lot of people, depending on their situation, it can be the foundation of something genuinely workable. The key word there is depending. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack. Because I think what makes people anxious about retirement isn't the number itself. It's not knowing what the number means in real life. And that uncertainty, that gap between having a balance and understanding a balance, is what keeps people up at night far more than the actual math does. Let's start with the most common framework people use when thinking about retirement savings. It's called the 4% rule. You've probably heard of it. The basic idea is this. If you have a pool of retirement savings, you can withdraw roughly 4% of it per year. And historically speaking, that money has a very good chance of lasting 30 years without running out. It's not a guarantee, it's a guideline, but it's one that a lot of financial planners still reference as a reasonable starting point. So what does 4% of $300,000 look like? It's $12,000 a year. That's $1,000 a month. And I know that number just made some of you uncomfortable because $1,000 a month feels impossible. Rent in a lot of cities is more than that by itself. But before you close this video or spiral into anxiety, I want you to hold that number for just a second because that's only one piece of the picture. Here's what most of these conversations leave out. Retirement income is rarely just one source. For most people in the United States, Social Security becomes a significant piece of the puzzle. The average Social Security benefit right now is somewhere in the range of $1,700 to $1,800 per month for someone retiring at full retirement age. If you delay claiming until age 70, that number can climb significantly higher, sometimes north of $2,000 or even $2,500 a month, depending on your earnings history. So now let's run that same math with a little more context. If you have $300,000 and you're drawing 4%, that's $1,000 a month from savings. Add a modest Social Security benefit of, say, $1,500 a month. Now you're looking at $2,500 a month in combined income. That's $30,000 a year. Is that comfortable? That depends entirely on how you define comfort. In parts of rural America or in a smaller Midwestern city, or if you've paid off your home, that $30,000 can actually go a long way. In San Francisco or Manhattan? No, not even close. But the point is, context changes everything. Now let's talk about what $300,000 actually requires of you psychologically, because I think this is where most financial content falls flat. It doesn't just ask you to run the math, it asks you to confront some very real questions about identity, lifestyle, and expectations. Think about the person who spent 30 years in a career where their income grew consistently. They got used to a certain life, a certain kind of grocery store, a certain vacation every year, maybe a payment on a newer car. For that person, retiring on $300,000 isn't just a math problem, it's an identity shift. It asks them to redefine what enough looks like, and that can feel deeply uncomfortable, even if the numbers technically work. On the other hand, think about someone who has been intentional their whole life. Maybe they live below their means, their house is paid off, or they're renting something affordable, their kids are grown and independent, they don't have a car payment. For that person, $300,000 is a very different conversation. The same number, entirely different lived reality. This is why I want to push back a little on the panic that often surrounds savings numbers like this. The anxiety isn't just about money, it's about whether your future self will be okay, and that's an emotional question as much as a financial one. There's also a factor that people dramatically underestimate, and that's the impact of part-time work or semi-retirement. We tend to think of retirement as this binary switch. One day you're working, the next day you're not. But a growing number of people are finding that working even 10 to 15 hours a week in something low stress, a part-time job, consulting, a small passion project, can completely change the math. If you're earning just $1,000 a month from some kind of flexible work, that reduces the pressure on your savings dramatically. Now your portfolio doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting. And psychologically, having some form of purpose and structure in your days turns out to be one of the biggest predictors of happiness in retirement. So semi-retirement isn't a consolation prize. For a lot of people, it's actually the better version. There's also the reality of healthcare to deal with honestly. This is where $300,000 can feel a lot smaller very quickly if you retire before age 65, because you're not yet eligible for Medicare. Private health insurance before Medicare kicks in can cost anywhere from $400 to $800 or more per month, depending on your age and the plan you choose. That's a meaningful line item. If you're planning early retirement, this cost needs to be built into your model explicitly, not hand-waved away. And then there's inflation, the thing that quietly erodes purchasing power over time. That $1,000 a month withdrawal you're taking today won't feel like $1,000 in 15 years. This is why the investment side of your $300,000 matters too. Money sitting in a savings account earning very little is slowly losing its real value. Money invested in a balanced, diversified portfolio has at least a fighting chance of keeping pace with inflation over time, which is why how you hold that $300,000 is just as important as having it. Here's the mindset shift I want to offer you, and it's one that took me a while to fully internalize. We've been taught to think about retirement savings as a destination, like there's a number you're supposed to reach, and once you get there, you've won, you're done, you can exhale. But that framing creates a kind of perpetual anxiety, because there's always someone with a bigger number, always a headline telling you it's not enough, always another variable that makes the math feel insufficient. What if instead you thought about $300,000 not as a destination, but as a foundation? A foundation doesn't have to do everything by itself. It's not supposed to. A foundation supports the structure that gets built on top of it. And the structure, in retirement terms, is the combination of your savings, your Social Security or pension, any part-time income, your actual spending habits, your paid-off assets, your health, and your sense of what a good life looks like for you specifically. When you shift from "do I have enough" to "what does this foundation enable and what do I need to build on top of it?" the entire emotional quality of the question changes. It becomes a design problem instead of a judgment about your worth. And this matters psychologically in a really profound way, because money anxiety isn't just about numbers, it's about control. It's about whether you believe you have agency over your own future. And the truth is, even with $300,000, you have far more agency than the fear would have you believe. You have choices. They might not all be the choices you imagined when you were 35, but they're real choices, and that matters. So what can you actually do with this if you're sitting at or near $300,000 right now? The first thing is to build what I'd call a retirement income map. Not a budget yet, a map. Write down every potential income source you might have in retirement. Social Security, any pension, part-time work income you're willing to consider, any rental income, anything. Then put your $300,000 withdrawal next to it. See the full picture together before you make any conclusions. The second thing is to get honest about your actual spending. Not the spending you think you should have, your real spending. Go back 3 months and add it up. Most people are surprised to find their actual number is lower than their imagined fear number. Strip out work-related costs, the commuting, the lunches out, the professional wardrobe. Retirement spending is often genuinely lower in the early years than working life spending, especially once kids are independent and a mortgage is paid off or close to it. Third, take the Social Security optimization question seriously. The difference between claiming at 62 versus waiting until 70 can be genuinely transformative for your monthly income, sometimes by 70 to 80% more per month. If you have $300,000 in savings and decent health, bridging to a later Social Security claim date by drawing from savings in the early years can actually increase your lifetime income significantly. This is a conversation worth having with a fee-only financial planner who can run your specific numbers. Fourth, look at the housing variable. If you own a home and it's paid off, that changes your cash flow math dramatically. If you're in a high cost of living area, there are people who have meaningfully changed their retirement picture simply by choosing to live somewhere that costs less. That's not giving up, that's being strategic. And fifth, this one is less about math and more about mental health. Give yourself permission to define retirement on your own terms. If working 2 or 3 days a week doing something you actually enjoy means you sleep better at night and your savings last longer, that's not failure. That's a really smart life design. I want to leave you with this. $300,000 is real money. It took real sacrifice to save, real years of choosing to put money away instead of spending it, real discipline, real trade-offs, real effort, and it deserves to be seen clearly, not through the lens of fear and not through some fantasy that doesn't account for your actual life. The retirement that $300,000 can support might look different from the one you imagined in your 30s, and honestly, that's okay. Because the retirement that matters isn't the one in the magazine ad. It's the one where you wake up in the morning with enough security, enough freedom, enough peace of mind to actually enjoy the time you have. That might take some adjustments, some honest conversations with yourself, and maybe with a professional. Some willingness to redefine what a good day looks like when it isn't organized around a job. But none of that is impossible. None of it is out of reach. Progress beats perfection. A foundation, however imperfect, is something to build on. And $300,000, held wisely, combined thoughtfully, and seen clearly, is a foundation. Take a breath. You're further along than the fear would have you believe.